Ladies and gentlemen, take your seats. We start our panel, which is entitled Allied Victory, and the plenipotentiary and extraordinary ambassadors of our Western allies participate in this panel. You may listen to them, ask questions, and here we're going to welcome ambassadors.
Hello. We have Larisa, GALADZA, Canadian ambassador to Ukraine. Good to see you. Matti, MAASIKAS, EU ambassador, head of EU delegation to Ukraine. Good to see you. Etienne, PONCINS, ambassador of French Republic to Ukraine. Good to see you, sir. Melinda, SIMMONS, United Kingdom ambassador to Ukraine. Good to see you. Anka, FELDHUSEN, ambassador of Germany to Ukraine. Good to see you.
Before that, we will listen to the special address by Alexandra Matviichuk, Nobel laureate of 2025, director of the Civil Liberties Center. My name is Alexandra Matviichuk. I chair the Center of Civil Liberties. I'm very happy to greet the participants of Kyiv Security Forum. It's very symbolic that it starts its work on the 1st of December, the day of Ukrainian referendum won in 1991. The overwhelming majority of citizens said yes to Ukrainian independent state. Today we again say yes to Ukrainian independent state, but we are voting not with ballot papers, but we are paying very high price in this war which was started by Russia. And this war is a vivid reminder that there is no international system of security. We are living in the very dangerous world in which the permanent member of the Security Council of the UN launches aggressive war has been doing this for 8 years, organizes a full-scale invasion. Nobody can stop him. We are living in the world where the whole system of UN does not allow Ukrainian civil rights activists to get at least one person from a Russian under Russian influence, from Russian prisons. We are living in the world when the Russian missile hits Kyiv and kills Ukrainian journalist Vera Hirich, and this world should be changed. We have to start radical reform of the international peace architecture in order to provide guarantees of security and human rights to all people and countries, irrespective of whether they are part of military bloc or irrespective of their military capabilities. We have to expel Russia from the Security Council of the UN for systematic violation of its statute. We also have to organize an international tribunal and bring Putin, Lukashenko, and other war criminals to responsibility, to justice. And this needs only Ukraine. The Russian military for decades committed military crimes in Chechnya, in Georgia, in Mali, in Syria, in Libya, and they stayed unpunished, and they believed they can do everything they want. And now Russia is using war as a method of reaching its geopolitical interests, and military crimes are used as a weapon. We have to break this network of unpunishability and bring to justice all Russian war criminals. This was video addressed by Alexandra Matviichuk, Nobel Peace Prize laureate, director of the Center for Civil Liberties. Now I'm inviting the respectful ambassadors to this stage.
Good to see you. Larisa, GALADZA. Matti MAASIKAS, sure, please. Etienne de PONCINS, thank you, sir. Melinda SIMMONS and Anka FELDHUSEN. Thank you so much. Please have your seats. In this panel discussion, which is called The Light Victory, we're going to listen to the addresses of distinguished ambassadors and their remarks about Russian-Ukrainian war. Like I said, the Q&A session is not expected to be during this panel, so if we have any questions, I would be the only person to do that. So we'll start with US Ambassador, Madam Bridget BRINK. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks so much for this great event, to be able to talk a little bit about the future and how we see it. And for my colleagues here on the panel, it's great. It's a really wonderful group, and you happen to catch us with us all here in Kyiv, and we're really proud, I think I speak for everybody, to be here. One question that was, am I supposed to make a few just remarks?
Yes, please do.
One question that was posed, I think, prior to the start to us, I don't know if everyone got the same question, was what do you see as victory for Ukraine and, well, for the world? And I just wanted to, we thought about that, and I thought about that a little bit, and I just wanted to offer a couple points. The first one is, and to step back, that I'm absolutely 100% confident that Ukraine will emerge victorious. I have zero doubt in my mind. I did not have a doubt before I came, and I have even less of any possibility, scintilla of a doubt, now that I have been here for about 6 months or so. So I think that is the thing that I think is very clear to me and should be clear to the world. But I also think it should be clear that not only will Ukraine prevail, but it must prevail. And we heard just now, I think that you heard also from Undersecretary Nuland just this afternoon, the importance of this effort, the importance that this is a strategic defeat for Russia is, of course, existential and critical for Ukraine, but it is very deeply important to the entire world, to the United States, to all democracies, to any person who wants to live free. So for us, this is a very clear path forward to victory. As we have said, as President Biden has said, and as the United States government has said, we see that President Zelensky, the elected leader of Ukraine, is the right person to determine when that victory is and what it means. And we believe he has set out, and the G7 has actually endorsed some basic principles. And the core of them are these: adherence to the UN Charter. He talked about that at the UN. He talked about it again at the G20. The G7 also endorsed this. The UN Charter means that it's respect for territorial integrity and for sovereignty. He also talked about the importance of accountability for war crimes and atrocities. Having had the chance to travel a bit around Ukraine, having had the chance to see some of the barbaric actions that have happened, and certainly for those of you here yourself or your family members or friends who have either witnessed it or been victims of it, it is absolutely something that must be held to account. The perpetrators must be held to account. I'm very committed to that. My government, my leadership's very committed to that. And the third thing is reparations. I mean, obviously there's been a huge amount of damage and destruction in many ways, and the United States is committed, and the world is committed to help Ukraine rebuild. But then just 3 points on this about support and how we can do it together. So we have, overall, the United States has provided about $33 billion of support this year in terms of military support, economic support, and humanitarian support. Right now, President Biden has proposed to Congress another $37 billion of support for the next fiscal year. This is really concrete evidence and proof that we are behind Ukraine. And what I can say, I'm very proud to be the U.S. representative here, the representative of President Biden, but I can say across the country, it's not just the administration, it's not just the president, it is the Congress, it's every American person, including from my hometown. And it's a really great feeling to be working in a country where when I say what I do, people are very supportive and say, thank you, make sure they win. And I say, I know, they will win, and we will help them. So the last thing I want to come to is just the importance of partners and allies and the importance of everyone on this panel. I want to recognize, because Anka is the leader of the G7 as German, and then it'll turn at the end of this year. But the Biden administration came into office with a very clear goal of revitalizing our alliances. Secretary Blinken yesterday was in Bucharest and talked about our partners and our alliances as our most important strategic asset as a nation. With 25 years in doing this work as a diplomat, I couldn't agree more. And so while I'm so proud of the United States contribution, it is not possible unless we are working together with Ukrainians and working together with everyone on this stage. So it means a lot that we are together and we are very united in this effort, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Ambassador. So I have another question for Larisa GALADZA, Canadian Ambassador to Ukraine. Putin and his henchmen expected Ukraine to surrender within 72 hours as a maximum. You've been to this country for at least, I think, 2 or even more years. From your perspective, where Putin and his secret services made the biggest mistake about Ukrainians?
Let me start by saying it's great to be at the Kyiv Security Forum.
Of course.
Sonia. Always thoughtful. Thanks for having me, and it's a real privilege to serve as ambassador in Ukraine, but it's especially privileged to serve as ambassador with these fine people. And we're not often in town together, and so we're really relishing this opportunity to speak on this topic at this thoughtful forum. I'm just back from Canada, and I also want to assure you of the depth and the breadth of support from Canada for Ukraine. I was on the other side of the country, on the Pacific coast, on the Vancouver Island. I was on an island off the island in a place where people go to get away from the world. They are recluses there. It's a place where you can retire and live in peace. And there are Ukrainian flags flying on that island, off the island, on the Pacific coast of Canada, and everywhere in between. So just to underscore what Bridget has said, in the United States, also in Canada, very, very strong support for Ukrainians. And that means strong support for the government of Canada supporting Ukraine and Ukrainians. What did they get wrong? I think that there were people that probably knew very well what awaited them in Ukraine. And what Russia doesn't have is a system of speaking truth to power. And creating the reality that's expected so they got what they formulated for themselves, a route. Like Bridget, we got past 2 questions. The first question is, what does victory look like for Ukraine and for allies, and what ought to be the priority after the war is over? First, when it comes to what does victory look like for Ukraine, Ukrainians get to define that, and my Prime Minister has said that very clearly and repeatedly. And President Zelensky is very, very generous. And I appreciate how emphatic he is about the fact that Ukraine's victory is our victory. It's a common victory. And not just the big victory, but the small victories too, all the way along. But I think it's also fair to say, what does victory look like for us? It looks like a stronger than ever alliance. It looks like an even better rules-based international order. It looks like a potentially reformed, strengthened set of international institutions that are meant to manage peace and security in all of its forms. And that's what we're working towards. And that's why the discussions of Ukraine in the UN, at NATO, in G7, G20, wherever we gather as an international community of democracies, of countries that believe in the rules-based order and human rights and the rule of law. That's why Ukraine is at the center of it, because it's important for Ukraine and because it's important for all of us. I think victory also looks like a total rout of Russia and its power in the world. A rout from Ukraine militarily, on the ground, in the air, in the meddling of the politics, but also a rout of Russia from all the insidious ways in which they are active in our countries as well. And that's what we're seeing through this war here, recognizing how even in our countries, Russia is an active force for destabilization and the denigration of democracy. What ought to be the priority after? I mean, there will be many. I mean, and I think that the obvious ones are obvious, and this one's probably obvious to you as well, but I like talking about it because it means a lot to me personally, and I'm now in my 4th year as ambassador here. It also means a lot to me professionally, and that is a priority to consolidate the gains that have been made in civil society, strengthen the social fabric of this country, so that all of the activists, all of the communities that have emerged, all the strength that has been showed by the Ukrainian people working alongside their government to fight this war and to win this war, means that after the war, communities and civil society and the NGOs that have grown up as a result of this war continue to work alongside their government. And that we don't, that is a consolidation, not just of society and its strengths, but of democracy in Ukraine. So that would be the thing that I would like to see after victory.
Thank you so much, Madam Ambassador. And Sir, Matti MAASIKAS, European Union Ambassador to Ukraine. For you, sir, what does Ukrainian victory look like?
Thanks, and thanks for inviting me to speak here today. It's a great pleasure and great honor. I subscribe to everything that Bridget and Larisa said. I want to add, from the EU's point of view, on people's support to Ukraine, 2 points. First, the EU citizens, since the start of the full-scale invasion, are strongly supporting Ukraine. And not only Ukraine's fight against the aggressor, but support Ukraine as a European state. As early as in April, by far more than 50% of the EU citizens supported inviting Ukraine to join the European Union. So when in May, June, the discussions were going on about opening the membership perspective and granting the candidate status, then the leaders of the EU member states that are traditionally not that warm towards any enlargement, not much effort was needed in order to convince them, because they said, hey, yes, sort of, I support because my voters support it, my people support it, and that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. The second element of EU's citizens' support is the temporary protection mechanism that the EU introduced in the very first days of the war. Now it's been prolonged for 2 years, which means all Ukrainians who flee the war are welcome. they automatically get almost all the privileges and benefits that political refugees are enjoying. They can start working immediately, etc., etc. Currently, 4 million Ukrainians are benefiting from this scheme, and I'm immensely proud of this. On the victory, how victory looks like. As my colleagues, I want to underline that this is for Ukraine to define what victory looks like. From the EU's point of view, two additional elements. First, for me, victory will look like Ukraine becoming an EU member state. 90% of Ukrainians believe that in 10 years' time, Ukraine will be a wealthy country, an EU member state. And this is a fantastic thing. That shows you how the EU symbolizes hope for Ukrainians these days. But victory is also on the existing member states, on the EU side. Having a new member state so big, so dynamic, so strong, strengthens the EU, strengthens Europe as well. So in all the senses of the word, Ukraine's victory is also Europe's victory. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And Ambassador of French Republic to Ukraine, Etienne de PONCINS. Sir, I would like just to ask you, France was among those European Union members who had the most prolific history of relationship with Russia. And it was expected on the beginning of war that France would be the country would be the most skeptical about sanctions against Russia. And because so many different ties, cultural, historical, and others. But now we see change of public opinion in France. I was honored to meet a lot of French journalists. Then myself as a press officer, I was with them in Bakhmut, I was with them in Kherson, and we came on liberated areas of Kharkiv. And I was really astonished that 100% of French journalists were so impartial about what was going here. They were so shocked by Russian war crimes. And they said that completely public opinion in France changed since this war started. From your perspective, would it last for a long time? I mean, this approach about Ukraine and what Russia did here. Or this could change just after several years?
Thank you very much first for inviting me, and I will mainly echo what colleagues have said, and I wonder whether what the two last will say, because a lot have been said. But to answer maybe your question and to put some comments, yes, France has long-lasting relationship with Russia before the war. That's pretty true. It's an historical fact. But it's also true that the Russian aggression has changed everything, and I can also echo what Ambassador Larisa said about the support in France regarding Ukraine. In my very small village in the deep center of Burgundy, there are also Ukrainian flags. So from the Atlantic to the Pacific, there is this very strong support. And clearly the 24th of February has changed many things for France, for myself also, and for my team. You may know that the French embassy has remained permanently on the territory of Ukraine during the direst day of March and April. I was with my team traveling all around the country in the western part, and providing support and assistance to you people. And we were absolutely amazed by the resilience and the resistance of the Ukrainian nation against aggression. And personally, that was a very strong memory, and I will never forget that. And it's really an inspiration for for my team and for the French people. The way you have resisted this aggression is something completely amazing and which was, in a certain sense, unexpected also. And but you have demonstrated your capacity of resisting this aggression, and this is something that will mark history. And I want really to comment that. Maybe to go to your question, what is a victory for Ukrainian victory? We have been very clear on that. It is for the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian leadership to decide what is a victory. My president has been clear. We will follow you because you are the one who are fighting against the aggression. You're resisting every day the aggression. So it is for you to say at a certain point, well, for us now, we consider we have reached the possibility of a victory and we will enter into negotiation. So on this, it is not for us to tell you what to do, it's for you to express your opinion. And I will also echo what Bridget said about victory. There is absolutely no doubt that Ukraine will prevail. That's very clear. And we will give you all the assistance until that moment. You know that President Macron has pledged a lot of military support, humanitarian support. France is very keen to continue to provide this assistance. And Ukraine's victory will be the victory of international law. And there is one point on which we insist a lot is the fight against impunity. France has been among the very first to send a team to provide assistance in defining those horrible crimes, and you are right, the French press and the French people were shocked by what was discovered in Izium. I was in Izium, I was the very first also in Izium and in Bucha. And so from the very first day we provide assistance is that because it is a question of principle. We cannot accept this kind of crime. And coming from that, I want also maybe to come to the present situation. Ukraine is facing now attacks or strikes against energy infrastructure. For us, and we have been very clear, those attacks are war crimes also. We have expressed that very clearly at all levels. And maybe my last comment will be about the conference that we organize in Paris in a few days, the 13th of December, on resilience, because we want to gather all capacity and expertise to provide assistance to overcome those strikes and to help you to go through winter. So this is a very strong initiative from our two presidents, because it will be a co-chair president by Emmanuel Macron and by Volodymyr Zelensky. My president is very much involved into that. He will stay all the day long. He will chair personally all the conference. There will be 5 priority: electricity and energy, of course, water, food supply facilities, healthcare, and transportation infrastructure. The Prime Minister Shmyhal will lead the Ukrainian delegation. He will be accompanied by Minister Kubrakov in particular. And the aim of this conference is to be very practical. We want to set up a coordination mechanism, an efficient one, a kind of Rammstein for energy, or as we have for the military. And we will be very concrete, and we expect this conference, of course, to be very successful, because we are on your side also in this difficult moment to pass this difficult situation following the unjustified Russian strikes on your infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. And my next question goes to Melinda SIMMONS, Ambassador of the United Kingdom to Ukraine. Madam Ambassador, we know that the United Kingdom made enormous efforts, actually, to teach Ukrainian military, and the number of Ukrainian servicemen, I know some of them in person, is absolutely enormous. They're coming back from UK with new knowledge. But basically, we also hear from our British colleagues that they're learning a lot here from Ukrainian military. What do you make of it? What do you think, what British military learned from their Ukrainian brothers in arms?
Thank you, and thanks for having me here today. So as you know, the UK, along with other countries, has been working with Ukrainian military since 2014, and has been learning from Ukrainian military since 2014 at the same time as training them. All that training, I think, is partly what enabled the Ukrainian military who were fighting along the front in the Donbass to be as ready as they were when this came this year. But at the same time, it was really clear to the UK that even in all that time, Ukraine was fighting a hybrid war, modern version of trench warfare, actually, and there was as much that we could learn as we could impart. And so that collaborative relationship, that was mature at the time of this invasion. It wasn't a new thing. And therefore, it was a very natural next step alongside all else that the UK was doing, was that we would revive that training. And it was natural for many allies too. So you will know that though the UK started that training in the UK within about 4 or 6 weeks, we had 4 new allies working with us, some of whom are on this platform, and by the end of another month, there were about another 6 or 7. Countries like New Zealand have sent trainers, for example. And that comes, those allies who have decided to participate, their decision to work alongside the UK, and they weren't involved so much in the training since 2014, comes from the same instinct that we had at the beginning of this. When we first saw what was coming, was that Ukraine would fight. Not sure how many countries thought that Ukraine would fight it. There was a lot of trauma after Afghanistan about the question of whether Ukraine would fight this thing. It seems bizarre to lump in one country's everything with another country's everything when they are so far apart geographically, culturally. But the same countries that stepped up were the ones who had been quite traumatized by the Afghanistan withdrawal. And it was a job in December and January to think not just about whether something we thought was coming was going to come, but also how Ukraine would react. And the UK was really clear right from the beginning that Ukraine would fight. And that was why the UK sent those NLAWs that were flying over shipment by shipment in January, because we knew not just that Ukraine would fight, but that you would fight to the death, that you would fight because you had to, and we knew how you would do it because we'd worked with you on it since 2014. That's why we did what we did back in January, not just because of what we knew from intelligence, but because what we knew about you. And it made us really proud to give that support, really proud, as well as being really clear about the fact that Putin needed to lose. We were equally clear that that would happen if Ukraine showed what we knew they were going to show, and not just militarily, but against the context of the strikes on energy infrastructure, your municipal workers, in fact, your communities who are putting Facebook groups together and offering one tower block that has energy for access for another tower block that doesn't have energy. The community spirit makes every single person who's doing their bit in this war a hero. And all of that inspires the UK to continue with its support. And its support already exceeds, I think, what any of our prime ministers thought the UK would be prepared to go to back in January. Over £4 billion, and not just on military aid, but like other countries, on energy maintenance, on cyber defense, on humanitarian aid, on economic aid, understanding that each of these was as critical to help make it possible for the Ukrainian military to do their job. So all of that, I think, when we come back around to your original question about victory and the relationship of the training that we've been doing with Ukraine, means 2 things. One, that when victory comes, it'll be a victory of Ukrainian bravery and readiness, backed up by allied support. It'll certainly be a victory of democracy and the rule of law. But what it will also do, I think, is that when Ukraine, and what Ukraine will, as Matti suggested, come to the position of staking their claim on a Euro-Atlantic and European place, they will be in a position to contribute so much in terms of everything that Ukraine has demonstrated about how to innovate, how to operate in a hybrid war. There will be so much that Ukraine can impart that will make the country the centre, I think, of Euro-Atlantic security conversation for many years to come. And we'll be with you when that happens, just as we were at the beginning. We'll be there when you finish it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Madam Ambassador. And we have German Ambassador, Madam Anka FELDHUSEN. And I'd like just to start with cultural question. Recently we saw a new release of German movie, Im Westen nichts Neues, All Quiet on the Western Front by Remark. And it's completely anti-war movie. Paul Boimer, a leading role in this movie, was mainly reassessed by many Ukrainians. And I should say this one of few movies which is most popular on the front lines. A lot of my brothers in arms, they watched this movie. And they simply answer to this question, why do they do it? Because typically people on the war, they don't like to watch anything about the war. Because everything what happens now, especially in Donbass, looks very much like World War I. All these trenches, all these horrors. And then the people see it just, well, they watch this movie and say, well, this is exactly the same. From your perspective, World War I produced a lot of actors, a lot of artists, new writers and everything. Do you think that after this World War, I don't know, free, whatever we call it, we would see the same renaissance of culture, not only in Ukraine but in Europe itself? And because so many people who write, who paint, they could be influenced by what's happening here during this war in Ukraine as well.
Thank you, Taras, for this really interesting question at the end of this long line of ambassadors, so that I have something perhaps new to say. Let me perhaps start with the fact that I have been really honored to follow Ukrainian politics already since '94, and that I was here during the revolution of dignity, and actually the beginning of the war in 2014. I remember vividly when in summer 2014 the Ukrainians pushed back in Donbass, and I was looking at the maps every day and was thinking, yes, 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 they almost got there, until Russia decided to intervene then. But Maidan, I think, had taught me that the Ukrainians have a clear perspective where they want to be, and that is what Matti said. Being part of the European family, being part of the European Union already then. The first demonstration during the revolution of dignity were like a huge party with EU flags. I will never forget that. Afterwards, indeed, I came back in 2019, and what you've just said about World War I, that was my very first impression when I think I went with the then Minister Avakov for the first time to the contact line. And I had just been with President Macron and President Steinmeier in Hartmannsweiler Kopf and alles. The trenches looked exactly the same, and they were more than 80 years, almost 100 years apart. That really, really shocked me. When the aggression, the full-blown aggression came this year, it was really just the continuous action of Russia since 2014. You're asking for creativity. I think what this war has shown us, to all of us, it's an existential situation in any people's life, not only in the one of soldiers. And as during 2013, 14, 15, I have now already seen so many examples of Ukrainian creativity. There was an exhibition in the Ukrainian house on war posters that really, really impressed me a lot. There's so much creativity and initiative coming from everywhere in Ukraine, and that was what I experienced also during the Revolution of Dignity. So I have no doubt that in Ukraine there will be a huge surge really pushed by this existential threat that is Russia is posing to Ukraine, but that the Ukrainians are fighting like hell. And that will indeed lead to a lot of new examples of Ukrainian art and in the world. I don't know about our countries, but we're living this existential part of Ukraine's destiny with you. I think my colleagues have shown that. We are at your side. And perhaps let me finish with, as head of the G7, Germany is heading it for another month, and also reminding you that this group of ambassadors was actually created by a decision during the last German presidency in 2015. We have been standing by your side ever since. And Germany has been, since 2014, together with the partners, your steadfast partner in all sectors. Melinda has just reminded us what Ukraine's armed forces have done since 2014, mainly training with partners. Germany then decided to help Ukraine's armed forces in the field of medical supplies, and the Ukrainian armed forces actually modeled their medical system on the German armed forces. I think this was also something that really made it different to 2014, when unfortunately many soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers, died because the medical system was not yet in place. So Ukraine had time to prepare for the full-blown aggression in February 24, and we have shown that we are with you, and we will be with you. And my country, not only as head of the G7, will be your steadfast partner. And I think the last weeks have shown that we are even able to deliver very efficient weapons that can help you at this critical time in the war, when Russia, as my colleague said, are targeting energy infrastructure. And perhaps just to finish, I don't think that people in Ramstein would have ever thought that Ramstein would not only be the synonym of a US base, but also a synonym of allied help for Ukraine in all fields. It started with defense, it continued with energy, and I think there might be another Ramstein on financial support for Ukraine. So that will be very a kind of anecdotic part of this whole affair. And I'm not sure how the people in Ramstein feel about it, but I'm very proud that it's a German town that will be the synonym of allied help for Ukraine.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'd like to go back again to you, Madam Ambassador, and just to say thank you again so much for United States and Western weaponry we're receiving. I saw myself just the outcomes of HIMARS working during Kharkiv offensive, and my assault unit, which played crucial role in the Kharkiv offensive, was all armed with United States M4 rifle, and Staff Sergeant Zakhar. He was so effective that he killed the Russian soldier who was just holding his RPG and who was targeting our commander, battalion commander, and he killed him from 200 meters directly by a headshot. But the question I'd like just to ask you goes back again, what's happening in the south, what's happening back to Crimea. Do you expect that the Ukrainian army, after its successful liberation of Kherson, is going to move that fast southwards in direction to Crimea? And we had different signals from United States that some people can be sort of embarrassed or frightened by prospective Ukrainian army entering peninsula in terms of Vladimir Putin threatening by use of nuclear weapons. What's your approach? What's your assessment of this situation?
Well, thank you for the question. I mean, I will just start off by saying Crimea is Ukraine. That's our position. That's the reality. That's the international fact. We're working essentially right now two lines of effort on the military front. One is, of course, to supply you and the other members of the Ukrainian military and other forces with as much equipment as they need to achieve as much battlefield success as possible, and it has been quite successful so far. At the same time, we're also very focused on the critical infrastructure. That is something that obviously means a lot to, of course, to Ukraine, but to every man, woman, and child across the nation as Russia and Putin escalates this war by making every household the front line. So we're doing both at the same time. Again, our view is that it is important for us to do everything we can to help Ukraine improve its battlefield position, to help Ukraine protect its critical infrastructure. It's very disconcerting, I think, to all of us, including all of us here in Kyiv, what Putin is doing and the way in which this war is going. And I think it just gives us all the more resolve to continue just as we started and to keep going. That's exactly where my leadership has been and continues to be. So we'll let President Zelensky and the people of Ukraine decide what ultimate victory looks like, but we are committed and we're going to stay the course.
Thank you so much. Madam Ambassador, just very much the same question about what's your assessment of situation in Crimea, and how long will it take, from your perspective, for Ukrainian army to liberate Peninsula?
What kind of a question is that?
It's always provocative.
It sure is.
Just we agreed not to stick to the plan in the beginning, you remember.
Pardon? It's... we've already, I think, all stated that Ukraine's victory will be on its terms, and Ukraine's borders were defined in 1991, and as Bridget just said, Crimea is Ukraine. The one thing that has been the one thing that's been a constant is the inability to predict the turns and the paces and of this war and the tactics. Quite frankly, both on the Ukrainian side, from where I sit, I don't know, maybe some of my colleagues know better what Ukraine's next move is, and also on the Russian side. But heading into winter, heading into difficult situations, I think it's far from me to predict what's going to happen in the south. But certainly we're very pleased to see the progress, proud to be a part of it. Canada is one of the countries that has now moved Op Unifier, which trained 33,000 Ukrainian Armed Forces members in Ukraine, the longest standing foreign military presence in Ukraine up until February was Canadian. We moved that operation to the United Kingdom to continue doing what needed to be done to make sure that regardless of where Ukrainian armed forces are fighting, they can be effective and prosecute the war the way that their excellent commanders plan for them to do.
Thank you so much, Madam Ambassador. And Mr. Ambassador, the next question goes to you. What we heard today from Ukrainian Vice Prime Minister Stefanishina, she was talking about talks about joining European Union. From your perspective, when do you think Ukraine will be ready to start negotiation talks with the European Union? Is it going to be by the end of this year, or if not, how soon?
First of all enlargement-related decisions in the European Union will be taken by the member states by consensus, which makes all the sense. The EU is a club of sovereign nations, and everybody must feel comfortable within the club and with the newcomers. So nobody can, at the moment, predict the exact moment when the next decision will be taken. You are well aware that while granting the candidate status to Ukraine, the European Union laid out 7 recommendations, 7 reform areas where the EU trusts that further steps are being taken. And the Ukrainian leadership, immediately after the candidate status decision was taken in late June, immediately mobilized to act quickly on these recommendations. And we are witnessing progress in anti-corruption sphere. We are witnessing progress on several draft laws needed to deliver on those recommendations. At the same time, these are large, difficult, complex issues. It cannot be done just like that. The Ukrainian leadership set itself, and I very much welcome that, that helps you focus, set itself a deadline to be ready to with the delivery on those recommendations by the end of the year. We still have time. I'm personally following very closely some draft laws that are being discussed, and then the European Commission presents to the member states its assessment. It's unfortunately or fortunately, rather I would say realistically, it is not only, the EU integration is never only about adopting the laws. It's about the implementation of these laws as well. Because again, the existing members of the club want to be sure that the newcomer also is able to fulfill all the obligations that come with the membership. The Ukrainian leadership is, and it is actually, it makes all the sense, I must admit, is constantly insisting that if Ukraine delivers, Ukraine should be assessed earlier than normally the EU does it in the autumn, in October. So the next regular report on enlargement will come next October. Ukrainian leadership is pushing for quicker assessment. That I cannot yet predict whether this will materialize or not. I want first to see the delivery on those 7 areas. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Ambassador. In Izum and Kharkiv region, we saw the mass gravings left behind by Russian occupants and numerous atrocities and war crimes committed by Russians, and Russian interrogation rooms, chamber of torture, not only in Izum, in Shevchenkovo, in Balaklia, and in Kupiansk. And it all looked like completely planned. It didn't look like it was a sort of improvisation. The Russians had clear plan, and all the interrogation officers were doing everywhere exactly the same procedure. That's what we learned from the victims of these war crimes. From your perspective, how long will it take to investigate all this? And do you see any chance that these Russian war criminals ever would be found and they would be taken responsible for what they did?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, I agree. There are part of organization in this criminality, but there is also part of improvisation also from the army, from the Russian troops also. So the two components of the crimes are present. As I have said, we were among the very first to send some legist team and doctors to support the Prosecutor General. We have a very good relationship with the Prosecutor General Kostin from the very beginning, and we are really on your side on that. Now this is the third mission that we have sent. The two first were in Bucha, and the last one was in Kharkiv, and we are also considering to bring support to the CPI for Kherson, because there is also some crimes that has been discovered in Kherson. So on this, to answer your question, how the Russians will be brought accountable, I think it's for, first it's for the investigation to go on, and it's for the prosecutor Kostin and his team to go ahead with the support of the international community, and we will bring support if needed again. But there are so many cases. I understand that there are 50,000 investigation cases, so it's really something enormous to cope with, and it will take years. We have also the experience in former Yugoslavia, so it will take years. And maybe on a side question, the question of the tribunal for aggression, because this is not linked, but there is some similarities on that. I just want to inform you that there was a high-level delegation in Paris, and we have a very fruitful conversation on this matter, which is very difficult because there are legal consequences. So we cannot bring yes or no question, but I think that was very good that this delegation led by Ambassador Kornikiewicz was in Paris and start discuss with our experts. So altogether, I think we will make sure that those crimes will not remain unpunished, and this is really a political dimension that we will pursue at the highest level in France for sure.
Thank you so much, sir. And another question goes to Madam Ambassador Melinda SIMMONS. From your perspective, if we're talking about the issue of global South, what should we do to increase support of non-Western nations to the Ukrainian restoration after this war?
Thanks. And I think it's a really great and really important, timely question to be asking, because I think the next few months are going to potentially see some quite difficult machinations from Russia, who are already positioning themselves potentially as the country that wants peace, whereas Ukraine wants to continue fighting. It's an appalling fake narrative coming from a country that is doing what it's doing to Ukraine, but nonetheless it's a narrative that has to be taken really seriously and has to be acted on, and an area where Ukraine needs help. And Ukraine needs help because Ukraine's diplomatic network is not as strong as it needs to be in the patient, long-term engagement that is needed to get the correct narrative through to countries who have had a relationship, whether of dependence or just of historical cooperation or whatever, for many years, for decades, in fact. And when you have a relationship with Russia over decades, you don't get many countries to change their minds about UN Security Council resolutions or peace processes overnight. It's a quite dedicated process of both talking, but about helping with the strategic communications that are needed. And funnily enough, this is something that some of us were talking about yesterday, and there are at least 3 or 4 of us on this platform whose countries are already supporting Ukraine in some really great strategic communications work in the Global South. And that's going to need to be a long-term campaign. But you also need this patient diplomacy. And that too is where our own missions in those countries, many of whom actually in the first phase of this war started to reach out to Ukrainian ambassadors in that country or within the region if Ukraine didn't have an embassy there, to start talking about what support they may need to have those conversations that had not been had before in those countries. It's helped massively by the calls that the president has been making, often for the first time, to some of the leaders of some of those countries, but that's just a beginning. It just doesn't end with one call between heads of state. So this is another quite interesting and less tangible form of support that allied countries, as I said, already are, but are going to need to step up in coming months to make sure that this odious equivalence that Russia is giving to Russia and Ukraine in this invasion, there isn't an equivalence here. There is an invader. And then there are those who are seeking to push them back out of their territory. This is not a conflict. It's not equal interests here. That we all help in that diplomatic effort to get this message across over a long and patient period of time. And if we do stick with it, over that period of time, we can help shift that narrative. But we have to all understand that that's what diplomacy is. It is long and patient work. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Madam Ambassador. And the final remarks from German Ambassador, Madam Anka FELDHUSEN. Yesterday, we saw German Bundestag recognizing Ukrainian Holodomor as a genocide. It's a historical decision. From your perspective, how do you assess this historical shift in German elites about these crimes committed by Soviets against Ukrainian nation?
For Germany, this is a very, very, very important step. And it has only been preceded once concerning the Armenian genocide. And this is because of Germany's history, of course. For us, the how to say that, the ultimate genocide was the one that we committed, where Germany were the perpetrators, the Holocaust during World War II. And that made us so reluctant to recognize anything else as being a genocide. I was more than happy, I have to say, to see the developments of the last 10 days when it became clear that really for the first time, because the question about the Holodomor had been going on in the petition committee here for at least a year and a half, if not 2 years in Germany. But for the first time it became clear in the last 2 weeks that there was an overall and cross-party support to recognize the Holodomor as genocide in the German parliament. And this took up speed really in the last 2 weeks, and we've seen the result yesterday. So I think for Germany this is another huge step that we have taken since the beginning of the Russian aggression this year. And you have seen the comments also, because this is a political decision by our parliament, but you have seen the comments of parts of our government, also from my foreign ministers, wholeheartedly welcoming this step. As well as our President Steinmeier, who was very thankful to the parliament, and he had talked about this issue with President Zelensky while he was here in October. So this is just one more aspect of our bilateral relations that have changed massively in the last months.
Thank you so much, Madam Ambassador, for his concluding remarks. And now we're giving floor to Chairman of Kyiv Security Forum, Prime Minister of Ukraine in 2014-2016, Arseniy Yatsenyuk.
Well, before the concluding remarks to be delivered by the CEO, by the head of the Atlantic Council, you know, look, your political leadership, your governments, your people usually praise Ukrainian people, Ukrainian military, how courageous we are. This time, let me do vice versa. Madam Ambassador of the United States, in your person, we are very grateful to the United States, to the Biden administration, to those who support GOP or Dems, for your unwavering support of the Ukrainian people. Madam Ambassador of Canada, thank you. Thank you for this kind of staunch support. You know that a part of Canadian DNA is Ukrainian one. So we are very grateful for this committed approach to Ukraine, for the way you are helping us. Mr. Ambassador of the European Union, in your person, we would like to thank everyone who is not on this panel, an entire EU membership. It's difficult to maintain this kind of unity, unprecedented unity, but you managed. You managed to fight for the values. Mr. Ambassador of the Republic of French Republic, you are one of the powerhouses of the European Union, and your support of crucial importance for us, and your president is doing its utmost. We wish a good state dinner in DC, and we hope that the next state dinner is to be in Kyiv. Madam Ambassador of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, you were and you are at the forefront of our fight. We feel your support, we know your support, and we highly appreciate and commend your very strong stance in our fight for our freedom. Madam Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany, you are doing utmost. Not everyone expected this kind of very strong response. Yesterday I received a letter from the Bundespresident greeting the Kyiv Security Forum. So, and the thing that you recognized Holodomor as an act of genocide is another sign of not a new type of policy, but of true policy of Germany and of the entire free world. So we thank to all of you, and applauses from us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much from all of us. Thank you.